Excellent. Thank you, Jared. Everyone is here. It is 6 o'clock. Let's begin with roll call.
Nyla Fry,
Present.
Trisha Brown,
Present.
Sam Kaufman,
Here.
Kristen Runge,
Present.
Aaron Moran, Joe Zisselsberger,
Here.
and Robert McPherson.
Here.
All right, first thing on the agenda is confirmation of open meeting compliance, public posting, official notice, and online availability.
I can confirm that the draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on 4/28. The final agenda was posted in all 3 official posting locations on 4/27, and the final agenda and packet were made available online on 4/27. There's 2 notes to remember for our audience members. Please be sure that you sign in on the sign-in sheet with your name, address, and municipality for accurate record keeping. And those interested in participating in the public comment or public hearing portion, please fill out the form and hand it to me prior to the agenda item. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to make a comment for anything that is on the agenda or not on the agenda? Or is there anyone online who would like to make a comment?
We have 1 form for Matt Brink at 1701 Tierney Drive.
Is that for the public hearing?
Speak at the perfect time, so I can wait.
All right, I'll have you wait. Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments from anyone in the audience or anyone online?
We have 1 individual shown online, and for that person, please click raise hand and I'll see if you'd care to speak during public comment. I do not see the hand raised.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda, would anything like anyone or would anybody like anything pulled from the consent agenda? If not, do we have a motion to pass it?
I'd like number 2 pulled, please.
Right. And then I will ask, do we do the pulled item first or the consent agenda item first? It's been a while since I've done this.
We do the consent agenda first.
All right. So in lieu of number 2 or absent number 2, do we have a motion to pass the remainder of the items on the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda items 1 and 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next to you, Nyla, for number 2 on the consent agenda, which is the approval of a temporary Class B retailer's license application for the St. John's Parish Festival.
Everything looks like it's in order, except it doesn't give a start time and an end time for serving.
I apologize, I did not look at that. We can clarify that if you'd like. I can pull up what they did last year and they said they were doing the same, but I'd be happy to.
I'd appreciate that.
Do you want to wait? Or do you want,
What are our options?
well, I could contact the person that's in charge and we could make a motion on that. Otherwise, we can pull it and wait till the next meeting.
When is, now, let's see, our next
meeting is the
15th and the event is
Not.
June.
So there's time.
There'd be time. All right. Shall we do that? Do you like that, Nyla?
Yes,
All right.
please.
If you don't mind.
I was just gonna say another option would be, if you wanted to, you could approve it with the hours consistent with what were approved last year. And if that's gonna be a concern, if that's okay with you, if that's a concern with the applicant, then it would be on the applicant to come back. But if the applicant was okay with the hours that were approved last year, then you could get it done tonight and it wouldn't have to come back to you.
Shall we discuss that? Can we discuss that? Or are we
Yes, you
allowed
can.
to discuss that? All right. So Nyla, would you like to make a comment first?
I think it'd be fine if we know what the hours were last year.
Let me go ahead and quick bring
Okay,
that up.
Thank you.
Robert.
Since you can finish.
While we're waiting, do you have a comment on this item? All right. Trisha? Joe?
My comment would be on the drawing that showed where everything was. It was missing the fence. There was an addition that came out that shows the fence in the same place as last year. So it's good.
Excellent. And Sam?
Nothing.
All right.
Here we go. Looks like. I don't see hours listed for last year either. Just the dates.
Bring it back then. Yeah.
Bring it back. Yeah, let's bring it back. Thank you, Nyla, for noticing that. Thank you very much.
Do we need an official motion to
Yeah.
table it to the next meeting?
I would, yeah.
Okay.
I'll move to table it to the next meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on. Motion passes. Moving on. Next item on the agenda is the public hearing, and this is a public hearing and discussion or action for Heritage Hills LLC request for approval of final plat, general development plan, and specific implementation plan and developers agreement for Phase 5, the fourth addition to the Heritage Hills subdivision. So let us open the public hearing. Do we have any comments from anyone in the room or anyone online?
President Runge.
Tim, oh, I'm sorry, you do need to present it, don't you, Tim?
Yeah, I was just saying point of
apologies.
order before the public hearing. So if I may, I'm going to share a few slides as part of my presentation. When it comes up on the screen. Sure. There we go. All right, yes, the applicant is seeking approval of a few different items associated with this request. They are an amendment to the general development plan for the Heritage Hills neighborhood, a final plat for the fourth addition to Heritage Hills, and then a development agreement that addresses the cost and timing of public improvements for this particular phase. What you're seeing on the screen right now is the neighborhood, the existing plan for the neighborhood, what's outlined in blue on the screen, if you can see that. I'll see if I can run my cursor around there. Oh, and this is generally the central portion of the neighborhood. In this area, the request would amend or increase the number of single family homes in this area by 3. So 3 additional single family homes. They'll amend 1 block of what's called the alley loaded, the Haven or senior twin homes to single family homes. And this is due to grade constraints in this area for at grade or zero entrance, zero or at grade entry. And then in addition, adjustment to the alley loaded single family District 1 homes to accommodate additional housing diversity in this area. And that would be accomplished through the reduction in the lot widths from 37 feet to 31 feet and from a minimum lot area of 3,700 square feet to 3,100 feet. So this, again, the area in blue is the area that we're talking about. And then the plat for this area, it's a little bit small on the screen, but the plat for this area would include 45 total housing units. The street layout would remain as consistent with the preliminary plat. And then the SIP was approved conditionally upon approval of this general development plan by the Plan Commission at their April 10th meeting. Staff is recommending approval and available for questions. Representatives of the applicant are here, Matt Brink, along with Dan Day.
All right, now how about we open our public hearing? Does that work better? Let's open the public meeting. Are there any comments?
Better? Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Brink. I'm the Director of Land Development for Viridian Homes. I want to take just a couple minutes tonight to introduce myself to this board, give you a little market update. We always like to do that when we're before a body, and then, of course, answer any questions. As mentioned, Dan Day with Waunakee, our engineer, is here as well, if any questions are needed of him. But to start off, just kind of from the visual landscape, if you haven't had a chance to get out to Heritage Hills lately, some big changes are happening, specifically in the quarry. If you've noticed our big rock mounds that we developed over the last couple of years, we're starting to move them. So the largest one that we had has now been moved out of the quarry east into the farm field to kind of get into our next phase of the shell game that we have to play with all those piles of material out there. So partially to get ready for phase 5, but then also for, again, some future moving around of the piles that we have to do. So being a Waunakee resident myself, it's kind of fun to see how quickly that has occurred once they were let loose to get that going. So visually, a lot of changes happening out there. But then market wise, as you can imagine, it's a pretty interesting time. And we all hear the stories about interest rates and whatnot. And coming out of 22, things are looking a little murky and we weren't sure how conservative to be coming into 23. But then the floodgates kind of opened and we've been really working hard to provide enough inventory, both at Heritage Hills, but then our other developments across Dane County. And a couple of reasons for that we're seeing. As you can imagine, anyone with a 3% mortgage right now isn't in a big hurry to move. So the resale market is depressed farther than it otherwise would be right now. So the supply is, being impacted by that, of course. And then partially, what we're seeing from our first-time home buyers is the rental rates that are increasing are causing that demand to stay high. So specifically for Heritage Hills, what we're seeing is the product that we're bringing on is moving pretty quickly, which is great. And that's, of course, encouraging. So in our constant internal analysis of trying to find that right magic mix of the product that we're bringing on, that kind of necessitated some of the changes that you heard tonight. So initially along the park side, where we had some of our larger estate lots, we wanted to change that, bring a little smaller offering on board, a little more affordable and attainable product that's going to match better what our buyers are telling us that they're looking for at this time. So we're excited about that component. And then as mentioned as well, what was going to be the Haven product, which is geared towards kind of those active, maybe aging adults, the great constraints that were realized there, it was going to be 5 or 6 steps to get into the home. And that just isn't ideal for solely targeted aging population, right? So you can still buy that, of course, at any age, but we felt a standard single family, a little bit smaller, attainable product, given the treads that were there, was more palatable to our buyers. So again, 30,000 foot view, demand is extremely strong. Of course, Waunakee is a very desired place to live, and we're seeing good continued demand, and it's a good size phase for us, 45 lots. So we're looking forward to getting this going and continuing our relationship with Waunakee. And again, thank you very much for your time, and we're here to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt. Do we have any other questions or comments from the room for the public hearing? Do we have anyone online, Todd, that would like to make a question or a comment?
There are 3 individuals attending via Zoom. I did send a webinar chat to them indicating a raised hand to be brought in. So again, another offer to those on Zoom, please click raise hand to participate in the hearing. I don't see any.
All right, no raised hands. And one last ask of anyone in the room? No, all right, seeing none, then we will close the public hearing. Board members, so what comments or questions do you have? Nyla.
Okay, I have a question and a comment and kind of followed with a question. First one is, what are the price range of these units?
So with the pricing, what we advise people to do is all of our pricing is listed online. So for Heritage Hills, for a twin, the listed starting range right now is 360,000, and a front load home is 420,000. So that's the stated price on the website. So that's the range that we would be in for this phase as well.
Okay, and then I have a comment. First of all, I assume is there going to be a blasting with this phase?
There will be, yes.
Okay, so I live on Verleen Avenue.
Mhm.
So I'm very aware of what the blasting did. And one time previously, we were in our home with company, and when your blast went off, and they almost went for the floor because they didn't know what was happening.
Mhm.
I'm hoping that this isn't going to happen, especially when, I mean, not only because you have Verleen, the old end of the street, but now you have new homes there. So I'm hoping that the repercussions from these blasts will be a lot less than they had been at times. I just wanted to say that because I think it's important for people don't want to be painting their house and to go through all the rigmarole to prove that the blast affected their home. Nobody's probably going to be able to do it, but
Mhm.
it's happening because I know in my home, I have nail holes coming through my drywall that were never there in the 46 years I've lived there. So I just wanted to say that.
No, and we appreciate that, certainly. And this level of blasting will be far less than when the initial blasting occurred for phase one, for the main quarry blasting. This will be for trench blasting. It'll be much less impactful. So we can with certainty say that. I don't know if there's a better way to quantify that, Dan, but this will be much, much less intense blasting. It'll just purely be for the trench blasting to get the utilities in and maybe some foundational blasting needed as well, but it'll be significantly less than the big booms that occurred early on in the development.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Robert, do you have any questions?
Well, now it stole my question about pricing, but it's a great question. I'm glad she asked it. One of the concerns that we had heard from the public at the Plan Commission meeting was about the effect of construction for people who are already living there, not so much the blasting, but the construction vehicles, damage to personal property. Has there been any sort of plan, devised for that for the next phase to give some relief?
Yeah, so we had a homeowner reach out to us and we got back to them right away. And it's a very active construction site, as we all know, with multifamily site going and a different contractor there as well. So what we've done is we called a meeting with the contractor to kind of reiterate, the importance of this, continue to coordinate. The best that I can tell you guys is we're taking extremely seriously. Again, we've had multiple meetings on this. We know how important this is. And one of the big kind of constraints that we have right now is there's only really one in and one out for the construction traffic. And part of this phase will be the extension of Branding Boulevard out onto 19. So that'll be done sometime in July this year, we're hoping or planning on. And when that's done, it's a right in, right out. It's not going to be a left, but it'll provide another entrance and exit point into the site. And primarily when kind of routing allows, specifically for the multifamily site, they'll be coming in on 19 right onto Breinig and then left into the site. So to the extent possible, we're going to direct to construction traffic to come in on 19 and leave on 19 when they can. So it's a really important thing for us. We obviously want to be really good neighbors. We're going to be here for several more years. And all I can tell you is that that's my job to reach out to the residents. I take it extremely seriously and we have constant meetings about it. So if anything does happen, obviously they'll reach out to us. We'll address it as quick as we can, and we will and are doing everything that we can.
I appreciate the response. I know that you guys worked through some issues even early on with the fencing, with the kids that were getting close to the rocks. So
Yeah.
I'm just glad to hear that it's continuing that good
Yes.
neighbor aspect.
Thank you.
Right, Tricia?
No questions. I think just a comment from the newer perspective is I think based on the intent of what was originally approved in this request, it still seems largely aligned with the mix of housing stock that was part of this original plan. So I don't have any concerns with it.
Thank you, Tricia. Joe?
I guess my only real question would be regarding lots 156 through 170 that back up to the park. If the intent really is to some extent, probably keep that price point down a little bit, is the fact that those back up to the park going to have a significant alternative effect?
Well, so whenever there's open space, that certainly is a premium offering to the buyers. So if you took, say, a 51-foot wide, we call it a meadow. And if that was more centrally located in the development versus, a green space, there certainly would be a premium for that. And we find buyers are, accepting of that. They kind of, expect that, for lack of a better term. So yeah, there will be certainly some premium sought there, but in comparison to what was initially planned for that lot itself, it'll certainly be more cost effective.
Okay, thank you.
Sam?
Both my questions were already asked, so I'm good. Thank you.
My questions were on price. When we're talking about a premium for open space, if you could just, what percentage are we talking?
Yeah, so that's outside of my purview, but it would be maybe a point or two on that. Again, that's on our marketing and sales side, and it's both market dependent, site dependent, kind of where things are at that exact point. So it's not to be evasive. It's just not a guaranteed like open space is this, because there could be different size open space. There could be water behind it. There could be a park behind it. There's just a lot of different factors that go into it, but it might be a point or two.
And I'll agree with Tricia that this is certainly consistent with the original plan. With regards to the senior housing or for
Yes.
the over 55 housing, I mean, is there an alternative site that you're now looking at for that? And when ballpark might we expect to see
Yeah,
some of that
so I
constructed?
don't know if it's possible to bring the rendering back up, but when we were analyzing how to solve this issue, and when we looked at the different areas that we had planned for Haven, so everything in blue that you see, especially east of Breinig, that's going to be Haven as well. So we're confident that there is still a lot of offering that will bring forth. It's just when we get to that side and punch through east of Breinig. So percentage wise, it wasn't, an overly large reduction in Haven. Anyone, of course, if NEH can still buy any lot that was going to be specifically designated as Haven, we just won't specifically market it to that 55 and older crowd. So they're not losing anything necessarily, but just that targeted marketing will switch for those 10 lots.
And then last question, in the first round of construction, I know you were notifying the public of blasting, and I know we publicly posted, if I recall correctly. And then am I correct in remembering that there was a text group or something that you were doing via email?
That was pre-me. Dan, do you know if there was a text message group?
I can't remember the total protocol for what was going on, but I do know that we were following the rules that we have set up in the development.
Yeah, so we will still notice, of course, before any blasting that occurs, we'll follow that standard notification process, but I'm not aware of a text group at this time, but I can.
That
Yeah,
might-
I can add that in addition to the development agreement, there's also a blasting permit. They've also already written the application, and I believe the permit's ready to go with the approval of the action tonight. And that permit includes stipulations included by staff related to notifications, adequate notifications so that the village can put out, to the best of our ability, social media, et cetera, that notification. For what it's worth, I'll say that they're not Veridian as much as their blasting contractor really did a perfect job of keeping us informed in a timely way last year. And I believe it was the contractor who maintained an additional list of contacts and in fact instructed the village to invite residents to contact them directly to be placed on that list for notification. I don't know if it's emails or texts, but the blasting contractor took those steps.
Okay, that is what I think I am remembering vaguely. Not well. I'm wondering, Nyla, do you think it would help if we kind of reiterated some of those rules at one of our meetings or some of those ways of becoming notified and help publicize that?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do. Thank you.
Yeah, we can do that for sure.
Excellent.
Thank you for bringing that up, Nyla. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank
Thank you. All right. Anyone else have any other questions? No? All right. Then is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the amended GDP and fourth addition to Heritage Hills plat along with phase 5 development agreement subject to final review by the community development director and village attorney.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, it moves, or carries. Welcome. There we go. Next item on the agenda. Discuss and take action on the 2023-2024 committee appointments. So who would like to, those are found on page 38 of your packet, if you're looking at that. Who would like to open up discussion? Nyla.
Okay, looking at these sheets, the first thing I noticed is since Gary's leaving from the board, we need someone appointed to the hockey board. And then I noticed that we have some vacancies, Board of Appeals, Community Development Authority, I believe Finance Committee, and the Police Commission. And so that gives me pause. And then also with the CDA, I'm not understanding why we have two board members who have an economic development background going on the CDA when I feel that perhaps Robert McPherson, who has a background in housing and banking pertaining to housing, why he would not be on that committee. So that's my thought.
ask the board, how do we want to proceed? We can discuss this first, or maybe it would help if Carla and Todd and I explained the process first. Which would you prefer? Questions first or explanation or a background on how we?
I would like to hear an explanation behind the choices first.
All
And
right.
then I even would take an additional step that we consider village board placements separately from citizen placements.
Citizen place?
Yes, and do
Okay.
two separate motions and so that we can separate out that conversation so that no village board member feels that if we're discussing citizen placement, that it would impugn their ability to serve on a committee.
Are we allowed to do that? To vote on these in separate? Citizens and then board
Yes.
members? Okay, excellent. Okay. Asking because I don't know. Yes, wonderful. So first, Carla, do you want to explain the process that we went through and then I'll explain my rationale for
Sure.
making some of the placements?
Absolutely. So first we start out the process with advertising and we start with advertising in the Horizons newsletter. That also is supposed to go out on the website and social media. And that's a process that we're trying to improve and get that done a little bit earlier. So there's more time. My time frame I'm thinking of is January 1 to get that out on the website and get notification out to residents so they know. That would also be the time that I notify the existing committee members who are having their terms expire that go around. And I notify them by email. And at that point, then we start receiving applications. And then once we receive the applications and we have a tentative deadline, we give that to the president to start reviewing along with a spreadsheet of all the past assignments for them to proceed with making the assignments.
Thank you. And then once I receive the packets or the applications, there are kind of three things I consider in no particular order: continuity of service. So making sure that each committee has at least one person that is continuing from the previous board so that we understand the decisions that have been made before. Second, I talk to all of the department heads and I get their feedback. I'm specifically concerned about what they view as the task ahead for each of the boards, what they think that their primary challenges that are going to be. And if they have any specific positive requests for board members, I take that into consideration. And then the third thing is the applicant qualifications. And again, these are not in any particular order. I look over the applicants. I move people around. I solicit feedback from the people, the department heads and the other village staff to see where kind of the optimal placement is of everybody. The fourth consideration, and I admit it's not a heavy one, but I do consider it, as I look at the days that the committee meets and what the board member requirements might be for different weeks. I'm hopefully not placing too much of a burden on anyone in any particular situation to be gone 2 or 3 nights a week, nor am I hoping that people are committed to more than 3 consistent meetings. There are instances in which we have board members who are on 4 different committees, and I try to, when that is the case, make sure that the 4th committee they're on is perhaps one that doesn't meet monthly. And again, I'm just trying to reduce the burden on our personal lives and make sure that we've got the time necessary to fulfill our commitments. So those are the considerations I've taken. They're in every instance. There are multiple people who would serve very well on a board, and I'm taking the approach with putting people on a board that they may only serve for 2 years, rotate off of that particular committee and get experience in another. So I'm not viewing these as permanent board placements, nor am I viewing these as long-term commitments, more along the lines of how do we rotate people in and out of committees in such a way that serves the best interests of the committee, gives each board member the experience they want over the long term, and allows us to make the most immediate impact in a positive way on the committees and serve as best we can. So that's an explanation. All right, now let's go back. Yes, Todd, I'm sorry.
And I would note that we are aware of the vacancies, the few vacancies that do exist. It was either the case that there wasn't an applicant that we had for that specific committee, or there were applicants, but not applicants that the village president, based on her decision-making, cared to put forward for appointment. What we'll be doing at a staff level is immediately following your decisions you make tonight, putting out a call for specific applicants for those specific vacancies, which we think might actually draw out some more interest from the community because we're calling out very specific committees. So we'll take that step, and hopefully within a matter of a month or 2, we'll have interested applicants for Kristen and then the rest of the board to consider.
And thanks for that prompt, Todd. Yes, occasionally we did have applicants who said they would serve on any committee and not a specific committee. It seemed that for some of these in particular, the CDA being a more involved committee, we perhaps wanted people who are requesting that committee in specific. So with that, shall we open it up for discussion? Robert, would you like to go next?
Sure. So limiting my comments to the village board's appointments. While I appreciate trustee Fry's comments, I'm not asking for any specific assignment beyond what was already put on there. I recognize that is your prerogative as village president, and I'm not going to argue that point. I do appreciate that I mapped out all the timing of these, and I appreciated that it was nothing that was an undue burden as far as timing. And honestly, the committees that I'm assigned to, I have personal interest in wanting to see them succeed. I do have concerns about, long-term costs with EMS and fire. I read the news just like everybody else and see what happens in other municipalities. So I don't have an issue there. And so if you feel that that's the best, placement of our positions, then that's your prerogative. As far as the citizen appointments, I do have a few concerns there. I did reach out to clerk earlier today to get some information about some of the applicants. I discovered that one applicant put in an application today. They signed it today, and filled it out today. So that's concerning. And there's another applicant that is appointed to the Plan Commission and joint plan that has significant conflicts of interest and has had to recuse himself repeatedly in the past. So I'm trying to avoid personals here. So I think that if we can have a further discussion behind, if you wouldn't mind, explaining those choices so that we can understand, because it doesn't give off an impression of fairness to other applicants that were not selected. Because I got a list of the pool, and I know some of the people in the pool have probably applied for positions that they were not selected for. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that, we had an election, people were expecting a little bit of change, and it's like, well, we just put some village board members right back in and gave them longer terms on some of these as well.
All right, I appreciate that. Should we go through all of the comments first before addressing that in case there are other questions?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You don't have to do it now.
Cool. Trisha.
I am fine with the committees that you have put me on, and don't really have any concerns at this point.
From a trustee standpoint, I have no concerns with that one. From the citizen side, the comments that Robert made, I think have got some validity, so we'll need to dig into that.
All right. Sam.
Well, obviously, like my committee assignments, I'm currently on those, so I'm happy to continue. And I agree, I'd like to hear more about what Robert brought up.
All right. So first one to address is Plan Commission and Joint Plan Commission. That was on me. I do want some continuity, and I do want that particular Plan Commission member to be on for just a little while longer so that we have an understanding of decisions that have made. We've got a lot of big projects that are coming down the road in the community, and I would prefer to have that person at the table for the time being for that. That could change in the future. That could change when we have citizen spots opening up next year, that some of those that did apply might be chosen at that point in time. So that would be that one. Second, the application that was submitted today. Which committee is that for, Carla?
That would be for senior services
senior services.
and parks and rec.
Okay. All right.
Do you want to offer? There is some
Yep.
context to that.
Okay.
So
Please.
we generally will receive interest in committees. That doesn't necessarily mean that people come through with their paper form. And we always follow through to make sure that we get the actual application form, just so we have one on file with their contact information. So besides what we may receive when people say they're interested in staying on a committee or interested in serving on a committee, that also goes into effect.
And last week when we met for our first meeting, was it Friday, Thursday, Wednesday?
Wednesday or
Wednesday.
Thursday, I think.
Wednesday or Thursday, I forget. It was a long week. I had been approached by somebody to be on those committees and they had not filled out the paperwork. And so we did make a phone call at that point in time. So that is completely on me. And if people are unhappy about that, I apologize. But that person had approached me long before. So
Can I ask when the application period closed for this year?
So we put a tentative deadline to have their applications in by April 7th. That in mind, they only had 2 weeks from the time that they were notified to the time that they would receive that their term was expiring. So we received applications after the deadline and we still accepted them.
And I. But a button issue there. I would add that we actually accept applications at any time. In fact, we receive them occasionally all year long. If a resident happens to come in, have a conversation, hey, I'm interested in getting involved. Like the form's out there, let us know where you might want to be involved and that will be in the mix during the next rotation, or if a vacancy occurs, that would be considered at that point. So there isn't a closure date per se. I think Carla explained it well, but we certainly accept them all year long at any time.
Yeah, we do accept them year round and they do come to me usually by email or if people drop them off in person. And I just pull them in a folder on my desk and hold on to them until they're needed.
Nyla,
How long are they kept?
We have them and we keep them. We actually put them in our record system
Okay.
for each year, but everybody reapplies every year if they're interested.
other comments? No, none? Pardon? You haven't, yes, you, please do.
We did not advertise this on social media this year.
We cannot confirm that it was actually posted on social media, so you're correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And my concerns is obviously is we did the least amount of advertising that I could see in our recent history. And again, we're kind of self-dealing back into the same people putting it back on the committees that. Let me rephrase that. The comment that was made about how much time that they had to make that decision. I would think that the individuals in question have significant experience with this board, so they should have known the time requirement behind that. Whereas an average citizen wouldn't know that. And if they see that the deadline is up, while I do acknowledge that we do accept them year round, and I know that for a fact, I don't know that, I think we're a little too inside government here on that, and that the average public maybe doesn't know that they can continue to apply after deadline. Normally, most people, when they see there's a deadline, they're just going to say, well, if I missed the deadline, I can't apply. And if there were people that were waiting to watch the result of the election, for example, in order to apply, they had even less time if they wanted to make that decision. So it just seems concerning, if I'm just a resident that doesn't really understand that, it just looks like, well, I can't get on to any of these committees because, it wasn't really advertised.
Kristen, can I speak to the?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. As far as the process goes, that is going to be revamped. We're actually going to start to do that process in December and have advertisements go out January 1 because of this exact reason. So I don't have as much experience here in the recent with doing these, but we are making a big adjustment, I'll just say, for next year's advertising, ensuring that it's put in our regular newsletter, whether that be quarterly, annually, whatever that may be. And that goes out to every resident that has an address, so they get a paper copy. And then we will also be putting it on social media and our website.
And for what it's worth, stuff happens, but I recall early discussions about our process was certainly going to involve social media as a critical component. So I cannot explain as to, I'm looking through our Facebook right now, and I don't see it either. But it was an expectation of mine that we would have been, and I know I made it clear that that would be a good tool for us. So I don't have a good explanation for that, but it certainly wasn't an intentional approach to this year's request for applicants.
Absolutely valid criticism. I accept it. It lies on my shoulder at the end of the day, as president. We will do better next year. We have talked it early on. Said I
It's
do,
totally
Carla.
on me. It is totally.
So-
I'm not blaming
Yeah.
any one specific
No,
person.
I
like,
just
I've-
want, I just want it to be known that it is going to be, it is going to be fixed for next year. Absolutely. I agree that it's not acceptable that people only had 2 weeks in a newsletter. You're only going to reach the people that actually read a newsletter versus the people that, the younger crowd that might be on social media and look there for it. So I very much appreciate that and I agree with you.
Mhm.
So that is completely on me. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Us.
You're welcome. We'll do better.
It's on
We'll
us
do
as a-
better.
as
We
a
need to do
team.
better. We will do better. Nyla. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to remind you, we need someone for the hockey board.
Yes, yeah. So we will advertise hockey board. We have openings on CDA. We have openings on finance committee, because our current appointee there prefers to rotate off. We have an opening on police committee. So there will be, despite what happened, there will be some very good opportunities to volunteer and have some impact on the community, although not every committee is open.
Should the hockey board be a board member or not?
Good question. Has the hockey committee member been a board member in the past? Yes, it was Gary.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll have to check the, we'll have to, because for some time it was Dave Ferris who served, who was an employee as opposed to a trustee. So we'll have to check the bylaws related to the hockey board and bring up.
I'd like to make a suggestion in that the person on the hockey board not be affiliated with the hockey program, so that they're representing the village and their concerns and not the concerns of the hockey group.
Okay, we will hope that we get a applicant that satisfies all of our requirements.
One more clarification. You had said there's a vacancy on the police committee. Technically, there is a vacancy on the police commission.
Commission, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that correction. All right. All right, so we have 2 issues before us, board member appointments, and is there any other discussion before we move on to requesting a motion? No? Brian, you're raising your eyebrows at me.
No.
All right. Okay. I know. All right. All right. Brian, do you have a motion that might help us?
My understanding is that you want to split these, and so I'm just going to throw both of them out there as 2 separate motions. One would be motion to approve the board, commission, and committee appointments as recommended by the village president for village board members. And then the second motion would be a motion to approve the board, commission, and committee appointments as recommended by the village president for non-village board members. Now, I understand that there may be different motions that are made, but those are essentially the concepts of village. You know, you can work off of what is on page 38. The only thing that I would add to this is even more complicated than the discussion that you all are having, which is a good discussion, because some of these bodies are statutory bodies where it's by state law how people get appointed as opposed to complete discretion for the municipality. So it is not necessarily an easy process to go through and try to identify all this stuff. It's like a large puzzle effectively.
It is. It is. All right. Do we have a motion? Let's do the board members first. Do we have a motion for board
Yeah,
members?
I'll do this since this was my fault. Motion to approve the board, commission, and committee appointments as recommended by the village president for the village board members.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
I
Aye. Any opposed? Right. Do we have a second motion? For the citizens?
Motion to approve the board, commission, and committee appointments as recommended by the village board for citizen appointments.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that one too.
All right. All in favor?
I
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All right. All right. So nearly passes. Next item on the agenda, discuss and take action on adding committee reports to regular board agendas. Let's open that for discussion. Robert, this is something, if you don't mind me handing it off to you first, that you'd recommended in a discussion we had earlier this week.
Sure,
Last week.
absolutely. So I brought to President Runge the idea shortly after the election that we entertain as a village board, adding in, and I'm going to stress this, brief updates so that we're not here for hours on each of the committees that we chair, or if we are not the chair, that we at least serve on. The goal of this is to bring better transparency to the public and also to help our fellow village board members who I do not believe want to spend every waking minute looking at videos of other meetings. Some of them are not even recorded, and to make sure that we are as fully educated on what's going on in our various committees so that we can make more informed decisions when issues do eventually make it up to the village board. And so that we can also see what's on the radar so that no one is really surprised in the future of what's happening, you know, coming from something from parks, something from, well, plan commission's not fair. That definitely gets up here, but EMS, for example. So that's the gist of it.
Discussion. What do you guys think of this idea? Joe?
I think the key is the brief part of it, but beyond that, I think it's great.
Trisha?
Just a question, would we think of maybe staggering them, splitting them up and staggering them so there's maybe just a couple each time instead of trying to cover them all every week or every month?
I would think so, just because they only meet once a month. So if we divided them so that you're reporting after the meeting, the
Yeah.
most recent one after the meeting occurred. But thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, I like the idea. Most communities that I'm aware of do this, so has my support.
All right, great. Nyla?
I think it's great, not only to keep board members up to date and what's going on, it's also great for the public.
I agree. I like the idea. Thanks for bringing it up, for bringing it to our attention. Do we need a motion or do we need to put it on the agenda for next time, or what's our process?
I think that the way that the agenda is stated right now is that you could make a motion to essentially approve this tonight. The only thing that I wanted to add, I think it's consistent with everything that you've said, as a way to keep it brief, keep in mind, these are updates for board members and for the public. You cannot engage in a discussion on it, but I think that the way that it's been presented to the board fits within that. It's informational in nature. And look, I think you could have a motion to approve adding committee reports to regular board agendas pursuant to your discussion.
All right, do we have that motion? Robert, would you like to make that motion?
Let me go through in a row. Is this like the first night? You make the new guy do all of them. See, I shouldn't have made the joke. Now I forgot the motion. Motion to add committee agendas, to add committee updates to future agendas for the village board.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? No, seeing none, it passes. In terms of operationalizing that, since we're splitting it up between the two, I will probably do some discussion with, or have some discussion with Carla about which week we report on each set of committees, and you'll know ahead of time, of course, then. Yeah. All right. Next item on the agenda, discuss and take action on process for consideration of the creation of TID number 10, request from MLG Capital Real Estate Investments, the Waunakee Business Park. Tim, do I turn this over to you?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
So the materials for this particular agenda item are found on pages 41 through 43 of the packet with the map, and I'll put that up on the screen in a moment on page 43. But the short version is staff is looking, as well as MLG Capital Real Estate. They made a request some time ago to initiate the process for the creation of the next TID, or tax increment district, in the village, which would be TID 10. That's the short version. To provide some context, included in the packet, some background regarding TID 3. Now I'll share my screen. Bear with me just a moment. So what's shown, and this was page 43 of the packet. What's shown on the screen is the general area on the south side of State Highway 19 and 113, where the current location of the business park. Back in 2000, TID 3 out in this area was created as an industrial district to spur development in this area. And that district essentially has to close now or very soon. So there is only approximately 34 acres left of developable land in this area, and much of that is shown in the blue. And this area is on the west side of Hogan Road. So we're starting to run out of land for industrial and business park type of development. So the developers or MLG, which the current developer of the business park is saying, hey, we're running out of land and this current TID 3 is closing. So what can we do to continue the process to make this area successful in terms of commercial industrial development? In anticipation, so what is shown on the screen or on the map in blue is one iteration of a possible TID boundary. Another iteration may be the inclusion of lands on the east side of Hogan Road. However, just like to point out at this point in time, those are currently not in the village. The village did take action to approve an annexation. However, the annexation agreement associated with this has not been signed yet by the property owner. So that still needs to be done in order for those lands, kind of shown in the brown, to be eligible for inclusion. Now, they could be at a later date. TIDs, I believe, jump in here, Brian or Todd, are allowed to be amended 4 times. So it could be that this initial one could be created and at a later date amended to include those additional lands. Hopefully that's
Well,
correct.
and I was just gonna say, I mean, depending on what the village board does tonight, theoretically, those lands could be next as early as next week. And so as you go through, if the board were to approve moving forward with working with Ellers to do this, by the time you get to the point that a project plan is before you, that land may in fact be in the village and could be included in the district.
Right, thanks. So we're not, or MLG isn't asking for approval of a TID or a TIF district right now. They're simply asking to start the process. And so in order to do that, we'd have to engage our financial consultant, Ellers and Associates, who've helped the village in the past. And the cost is enumerated in the staff report that would ultimately be borne by either the applicant and or the overall TID as part of the project cost. So one other thing that may be a little bit different in years past with creation of TIDs was that the Plan Commission was the advisory body to the village board. You may recall, for those of you who served in the last term on the village board, the direction given was when a new TID is created, that would be run through the CDA. And so that body would be essentially the advisory body to the village board as part of that overall process. So staff is still, from a consistency standpoint, thinks that makes sense. And so really that's really it in a nutshell. I would like to point out, and I'm going to just jump ahead in anticipation of some questions. So this information you're seeing on the screen right now wasn't included, but as part of the creation of a project plan, certain costs and revenues are go into that pro forma. What you're seeing on the screen right now are some of the anticipated costs for infrastructure costs, public improvement costs associated with this TIF district. They include the extension of Frank H. eastward toward Hogan Road, and then the associated sanitary and water lines that would run with that. In addition, there are the scale may not show this, but there are some multi-use paths associated with infrastructure in this area that would be needed for improvements or for construction. And then 2 intersections, the intersection of Frank H. as extended to Hogan, and then the intersection of Hogan and the state highway, State 19 and 113 would be potentially eligible costs. So if anyone has questions, we don't have the exact costs of those, but I do have some general, I would say, best guesses of what those may be. However, those would be, as I mentioned, if you decide to move forward, would be enumerated in a project plan that would come before this body again for review and consideration. So I think that's it in a nutshell. Available for questions, but that is the question before you to initiate that TID process.
Okay, so we're just initiating the TID process. This doesn't mean that it will go any further than the initiation.
Well, it would, right, we
Please.
would initiate it, we would engage with our financial consultant, that then would kickstart the formal process to create what's called the Joint Review Board, the JRB, and then all those bodies, the JRB, the CDA, this board would all, it would have to get approved at all those levels.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's, yes, Todd.
If I could also add of all the potential improvements you see here on the map, the one that has taken the greatest deal of time is the intersection of Hogan and 113. I just want to give a little bit of backstory to the effort that's been put into discussing those improvements. It's been years of staff work with the DOT to find a way to incorporate improvements for business park growth there, along with state improvements. The state had already planned improvements between Division and the large roundabout at I-113 and 19. That stretch in 2026 is scheduled for, is there a correction?
No, I was just gonna say it actually goes all the way to River Road.
Oh, all the way to River, okay. That stretch is scheduled for major improvement. I don't think it's reconstruction, but certainly substantial improvement. And we've worked with the DOT to get them to take necessary pauses in their typical process to give us the chance to bring forward an improvement at this intersection that they didn't have planned, so that we could include it with their 26 schedule. To us, it made a lot of sense. To them, timing was at issue. And we've been working with the applicants, the folks with MLG as well as Stotz's, to bring on a traffic engineer to complete the necessary phase studies to review those intersection improvements. And we're finally to a point, I don't know if DOT has said we're good with that improvement, but we're inches away from them being satisfied with, I think, what is proposed as a signalized intersection to care for the traffic needs at that location. How close are we to them being okay with that as a solution?
We have, I think, one more step, because there was, it was called an ICE intersection. Help me, sorry, Bill, if that's evaluation intersection, construction evaluation or something like that, that needed another level of review before they would do the final sign off. And so we're waiting to hear back from them on that.
So, but we're poised on this because if they're, and we've been given reason to believe by the staffers through DOT that the signalized intersection is likely to receive support. But if that decision changed to roundabout with the real estate necessary, all of a sudden we're talking about an intersection, if not perhaps twice the cost. And that would have a significant impact then on our plans related to the TIF district. So literally multiple years of work have brought us to this point, to where we're talking about these improvements and the need for TIF to be a supportive element, financial element, to bringing the public improvements forward. So thanks for giving me a chance to give some of that background.
Thanks, Todd, for the background. All right, let's open it for discussion. Who would like to go first? Shall I call on someone? Joe?
I'll go first. Obviously, one of the biggest pieces that I guess we get to kind of sort of decide when it comes to this is the but-for piece. I assume that will come well after the stuff that we make a decision on tonight.
Sorry, that would be part of the project plan. That cost analysis would be
Okay.
done and enumerated in that project plan report that you would, in theory, approve or not approve.
Okay,
Thank you, Joe.
that was my
Joe?
biggest concern.
All right, Tricia.
Well, I just, we've talked about this at CDA, and even just through the campaigning process for village board, it's just the lack of available land for industrial business growth is an issue that we have. And so I think it's on us to be proactive in looking to see what we can do to provide opportunities for growth for existing businesses and potentially new ones to come into the area. So.
Thank you, Tricia. Robert.
Come back to me in a minute.
All
if you don't
right.
mind.
Nyla.
I want to hear what Sam and Robert had to say, please.
All right, Sam.
I'm curious if in the initial traffic impact analysis, are the turn lanes proposed at the intersection going to be offset? Because I hear current complaints from people in the business park about truck radii and things like that and short turn lanes.
Yeah, Brian wants to jump in quick.
I just, one of the things I wanted to point out, and it's in your recommended motion, just to make clear, is the way that Tim and Todd have set this up is to the extent that the board votes and to move forward with this, and there is a cost associated with it, MLG would have to pay that cost. And so there would not be a cost downside to the village. And as part of that agreement, it would be clear that just because we're taking this step does not require the village board to in fact approve a TIF district in the future. And just on your question, Joe, not only would there be a but-for analysis as part of the project plan, but if this does proceed and ultimately there are development agreements that are associated with, let's say, a pay-go increment to be made to a developer because they've paid public improvement costs, there would be a but-for analysis on that specific agreement also.
And one clarification to the clarification. MLG would be on the hook for footing the bill for TID creation if the TID were to fail, if the TID creation fails. So there's no public obligation then. Otherwise, our approach has been, if it is created, it exists, the cost to create the district exists as an eligible expense to the district itself. So in that circumstance, the district would essentially reimburse the cost for TID creation.
Getting
Thank
back
you.
to Sam's question.
Sam, yeah.
I think the answer is yes. However, I'm not a traffic engineer, but that's something that obviously our engineering staff is reviewing. And if I understand your correction or your question, do you mean as two vehicles are approaching, those lanes are offset for making safe turning movements? Or if you want to elaborate?
Like what's being done at the intersection with River Road, where there's sort of a concrete, median separating the people who are turning from the main line of traffic.
Yeah, my understanding is there would be. So like a boulevard divider,
Correct.
somewhat. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Robert,
Yeah, I'm right now. So I have a few questions, and thank you for the clarification on who's on the hook for the cost, because that was one of them. The other question that came to mind, do we have a dangerous question? Do we have any sort of a ballpark estimate as to what these improvements actually cost?
We do.
Okay.
So this is, and granted, this is an estimate, and it's based, I'll say it's based on when we started this process, probably, almost a year and a half ago. It's been updated a few times in terms of the numbers, but taking into consideration recent, I'll say within the last year, 18 months, the rate of inflation and project costs, so forth. The total for just the improvements, not any developer incentives or anything, is in the neighborhood of 7.1 million.
With the big dog being the 113 intersection, that's about a $2 million estimate at this point. For
Actually, north of that, probably closer to 2.5 or 2.75. So that is a big,
signalized solution.
right.
Okay.
That's a big, obviously the biggest expenditure for this area.
Have we received any, another dangerous question, have we received any feedback from the state that they would be willing to contribute any dollars to this on their end, or is this totally on the village as it is their highway?
Yes and no. Yes.
I
and
would
no.
say
Todd, if you
I
wanna
would say
answer
we poked
that.
at that question. And we are interested in poking further at the question. The staffers who we've at this point been in dealing with aren't in a position to give that sort of certainty to us, but we would like to continue up the chain. And perhaps we'll be talking to some of you to help us lobby some of those solutions. Seeing that ARPA dollars have been brought to the state in support of transportation projects quite significantly, and expenditure period comes up in a couple of years. Perhaps this is a real opportunity for us to get some additional state support.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question to that. I'm sorry if I'm being too technical here, but if we receive any state funds, how would that impact the TID if we did create it?
how would that impact the TID? I think all it may do would lower the project costs.
Which in turn would have the potential to close the district sooner.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
Okay. My final question, and I know that we're not anywhere near to the point of doing the but-for test, but my biggest concern is the fact that those blue highlighted areas, they're all currently in TID 3, right? Or is it just the ones to the west of the Stotts implement?
No, I don't think all of them. So at the time TID 3 was created, for example, the Stotts property wasn't even in the village.
Right.
And so that wasn't, I think the one at the corner of Unique and Prairie View, I don't think that one was in either. So not all of them.
Okay. I guess my concern is just that for the ones that are already in, in the closing TID, and it appears that we did put some infrastructure in place there, we at least put a road in there to Prairie View Court, things like that. Is there any, I guess my concern is why do we need to replace it into another TID or are we just doing that because we need the value from it? We need future improvements in it to make TID 10 work. Is that my takeaway from this?
Short answer is, I believe so. We want to get the increment to pay for the improvements. Otherwise, where do those dollars come from?
Well, I'm not trying to be obtuse. I'm just saying that because TID 3 didn't produce any sort of improvements on there. I'm just trying to feel out, likelihood of it, that this is now suddenly going to make the improvements that we didn't get the first time when it was in a TID already.
Well, in my judgment, I would say that the fact that we're running out of lands, Waunakee is a desirable place to operate and be. I think that using this mechanism would be a pathway toward spurring further development. I don't know the landscape, I would say, has probably changed with respect to office development, which was, I think, envisioned a while ago, especially along the corridor, whether it's COVID related or, and the acceleration of work from home. I think office type development is probably lesser of a thing, I'll say, than it used to be. So I think some of the changes there changed the landscape in the area.
I think a little bit of what you're getting to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, but what is going to be the mechanism? What's going to be the mechanism to make these improvements actually happen? We wonder about whether it could happen without a district. What I will say that typically, and what I would expect in this case too, in tandem with creation of a project plan, we'd also be involved in discussions with the developer parties who are involved, talking about development agreements that we will need to strike with them to satisfy a number of requirements. At least with TID 3, I know we had in that case, we had, what was it with MLG? Was it a letter of credit or an escrow of some sort that was utilized to help front load dollars to complete initial public improvements. It's possible that may be part of the financial mechanism that we negotiate and address here, of which there could be several other pieces to that financing puzzle. I guess what I want to point out is that that's a tandem exercise that we'll work on over the course of the next several months to put those pieces into place and would be discussed within a project plan. Did you have other perspective on that, Brian?
I was just going to say the reason for the letter of credit, just going back historically with TIF districts, when this district was created, what you primarily saw was essentially municipalities putting in the public improvements, hoping that the development will come. And then you got those letters of credit to essentially cover the difference between the increment that was generated and the increment that the municipality needed to pay off its financing. What we've seen more recently, though, in what I've heard, is that developers no longer can get letters of credit for shortfalls for tax increments. They can only get them for public improvement projects, which we get all the time. But the protection then for municipalities has been, we will create the district for you, but you're going to put the improvements in, and then we'll have a pay-go TIF agreement. If you have a pay-go TIF agreement, and I'm just using this as an example only, you know, when you talk about a road extending Frank Ain't Street to Hogan Road, I mean, theoretically, what would happen there is the developers would put that in at no risk to the village, and then the village would just have a pay-go. And once the increment is generated, it gets paid back. I guess the only risk to the village is, so if you create this district with the idea that you'd like to see it closed earlier than the statutory closure dates, you'd have that agreement out there where if the development doesn't occur at the pace, you wouldn't be able to close it. But from a public improvement standpoint, you'd be covered.
Nyla. We'll come
Okay.
back to you, Robert. I'm sorry.
Thank you. All the information I've gotten, it was very good. Thank you. I've been talking to quite a few business people in town, and what they keep telling me is always follow the dollars, follow the money. And when Joe brought up the but-for test, it reminds me of a conversation I had many years ago with a person who's statistician. And she told me she wouldn't be much of a statistician if she couldn't make the numbers work for whatever outcome you want. And that's what makes me so leery about TIFs or TIFs. You know, I keep hearing and I see where they've been working for the village of Waunakee. Quite frankly, I think we've been pretty fortunate because there are it has been development such as this throughout the state that hasn't been so good. I wonder, but one of the questions that go through my mind is how many projects has Eilers actually looked at that they couldn't find a but-for test for? Or how many have they said wasn't a good investment? You know, so that's always in the back of my head. Follow the money. Okay, Eilers is making money on this. There's a lot of people's fingers in the pot. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Todd?
I think maybe Brian and I could take team on that specific question, Nyla, that I will say that there is rigor at the staff level with discussions about potential interest from a developer to create a TID or interest from a development for incentive that don't even pass the staff's desk before going to Ehlers for the deeper dive. In fact, the number it weighs much more on those that don't even get to Ehlers than those that do make it to Ehlers for the deeper dive. So there is discerning occurring at the staff level before it even goes to our financial advisors. But Brian, do you have?
Sure. I mean, just to piggyback off of what Todd is saying, I mean, Ehlers works in a lot of communities, including other ones that I work in. I say this comfortably. The developer never gets what they ask for. 100% of the time, it is less. I would say probably half the time, it's not the but-for test is not satisfied. Those circumstances you don't hear about though, because maybe it passes. It's at the staff level where the municipal staff, says it's appropriate now to share this information with Ehlers. Ehlers looks at it, says, yeah, this isn't going to work. It never gets to the municipal body at that point, because what the municipal staff says is, yeah, if you try to take this, we're going to recommend denial. And then the developer walks away, because the last thing the developer wants is to go in front of a board, have staff disagree with them, and then be denied. You have to remember, I mean, Ehlers is working on behalf of the village. Todd, Tim, and Renee, and I are working on behalf of the village. I mean, we don't just accept numbers that developers provide. There's a lot of pushback. Now, it seems like the but-for test is probably satisfied almost all the time it comes to you, but that's, I think, because of all the work, all the stuff that doesn't come to you, essentially.
All right, any other comments? No. For me, Ehlers is a fantastic outfit. I've worked with a lot of communities that work with them. Their reputation is well earned and hard earned. They're good at what they do. And I thank you guys for the time and care you put into vetting TIFs before they even come before us. I'm going to go ahead myself and make the motion to assign the Community Development Authority the task of conducting a TID creation process for a new TIF district in the Waunakee Business Park and authorize the village administrator to engage Ehlers and Associates providing TID coordination services contingent on MLG Capital signing the cost recovery agreement and placing in escrow an appropriate sum as determined by the village administrator.
I would
You'd like-
second that.
Oh, go ahead.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Passes. Do we need a roll call vote? Do we need a roll call vote when we've got a split? No? Okay, all right.
There's 2 names. Oh, is
Mhm.
Is that correct?
All right, with that, that was the last item on our agenda. Do I have one final motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you very much. See y'all in 2 weeks unless we see each other